Okay, let's jump right into this honestly staggering figure. $120.5 billion. That is the estimated total amount of government revenues and unfulfilled contracts allegedly missing, diverted, or just simply uncollected in Nigeria. Now, to put that into perspective, we aren't talking about a slight accounting error or a misplaced decimal point here. This is a massive, massive reservoir of national wealth that, according to prominent legal experts, is sitting completely unaccounted for.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to follow the money. We are tracing a path all the way from the oil fields and the corporate boardrooms straight to the front lines of national security. Because what we really need to unpack today is the real-world everyday cost of this uncollected national wealth. We're going to see exactly how this unbelievable financial gap directly impacts the lives, the infrastructure, and the safety of everyday citizens.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the 14-day ultimatum. Second, chasing the missing billions. Third, power and unfixed refineries. Fourth, the security funding gap. And finally, uniting against terror. Okay, let's start with Section 1, the 14-day ultimatum. So this isn't just some abstract theoretical debate happening in a classroom. Foremost human rights lawyer and senior advocate of Nigeria, Falana, has drawn a very real line in the sand. He issued a strict 14-day ultimatum to the Attorney General of the Federation, demanding immediate action to recover these missing funds. Falana is actually using the courts and the Freedom of Information Act to demand that the government finally muster up the political will to collect its own money. And if they don't, well, they're going to face direct legal consequences.
Moving right along to Section 2, chasing the missing billions.
We are looking at a deeply concerning pattern of diverted wealth that spans multiple political administrations. Let's actually break down this ledger because the numbers are wild. $62 billion in unpaid oil royalties owed for 18 long years, which the Supreme Court explicitly ordered the government to recover way back in 2018. Then you have $17 billion worth of crude oil entirely unrecorded in Nigeria, but somehow miraculously recorded at an airport in Texas. Add to that $12.7 billion unaccounted for by NIMASA, over $6 billion flagged by the recent NEITI transparency report, and a massive $29 billion allegedly lost to oil theft. You know, this ledger isn't even a secret. This information is largely in the public domain, just waiting for somebody to take action.
And the numbers only get bigger when we look domestically. Beyond all that foreign currency we just discussed, the Nigerian Senate reportedly identified this colossal domestic figure, 210 trillion naira, as totally unexplained by the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, or NNPC. In fact, legal advocates are currently fighting in court as we speak just to get a certified true copy of this Senate report officially released to the public.
Now, this quote hits the nail right on the head. It highlights the absolute paradox at the heart of this entire situation, and it brings up a deeply frustrating reality for the average citizen. Seriously, how can a nation actively borrow billions of dollars in foreign loans, placing a heavy, heavy debt burden on its own people, while allegedly ignoring vast reservoirs of its own uncollected revenue? It just doesn't add up.
Let's shift gears a bit into Section 3, power and unfixed refineries. $2.9 billion. This number represents the value of contracts awarded back in August 2021 by the previous administration to fix 4 national refineries. But here's the kicker. Despite this massive financial injection, those refineries remain completely broken today. Actually, reports indicate that over $25 billion has been spent on turnaround maintenance over the last 27 years with little to literally no result. Now the government is reportedly looking to foreign contractors, offering them majority controlling shares just to finally get the facilities working.
Talk about a stark discrepancy between expectation and reality. The federal government directed the NNPC to acquire a 20% interest in the private Dangote refinery for $2.7 billion. Simple enough, right? Yet, the management of that refinery recently came out and stated they only ever received $1 billion, leaving the government with just a 7% stake. So the obvious glaring question remains, where in the world did the rest of those earmarked funds go? And looking at the power grid, we're seeing the exact same repeating pattern. Under a previous administration, 18 national power companies were sold off. But since then, the government has continued to just pour trillions of naira in subsidies into these newly private companies. Meanwhile, everyday citizens have been divided up into tariff bands, facing skyrocketing electricity costs, while the actual service reliability, the actual hours of light they get in their homes every day, remains entirely stagnant.
Now, raising prices without improving the power supply isn't just frustrating for consumers, it's a direct violation of the legal framework. The law states crystal clear that you cannot legally charge the public more for a service that is actively degrading. Yet, this law is frequently bypassed, leaving citizens footing the bill for a system that fundamentally isn't working. This brings us to a really crucial part of our explainer, Section 4, the security funding gap. When we talk about national security, there's actually a massive constitutional misunderstanding we need to clear up. Nigeria doesn't actually have a federal government police force, it has a federation police. Under the Constitution, this force is supposed to be administered by a 39-member council. That includes the president, the inspector general, and all 36 state governors. However, because state governors rarely utilize or requisition this council, the burden falls entirely on the president. This totally cripples localized security coordination and leaves the states incredibly vulnerable. To truly grasp the scale of this funding issue, listen to this figure. An astounding 525 billion naira was earmarked strictly as security votes by the 36 state governments for the period between 2023 and 2025. That means the money is theoretically there, designated explicitly to keep people safe. But how on earth is that translating to the actual front line? Well, despite those massive security budgets on paper, the frontline reality is honestly terrifying. You have terrorist and criminal forces roaming around, highly armed with AK-47 assault rifles and modern combat gear. On the other side, local state security networks. Groups like Amatekun to the southwest or the Civilian Task Force in other regions are restricted by law to carry only locally made Dane guns and basic pistols. How can you ask security personnel to go to the forest and confront criminals that are armed with AK-47s with locally made pistols? This haunting question perfectly encapsulates the tragic disconnect we've been talking about today. It bridges the gap between national wealth, missing funds, and the physical safety of the citizens. You have brave individuals trying to protect their communities sent into the forests entirely outgunned, all while billions of dollars are allegedly unaccounted for at the highest levels of government. And finally, Section 5, uniting against terror. The consensus from experts isn't about creating endless new, unfunded security agencies. The solution lies in actually utilizing what already exists. The government needs to properly fund, equip, and motivate the existing armed forces and police. State governors need to step up, requisition the police council, and officially authorize proper modern weaponry for their state forces. And perhaps most importantly, political leaders must stop politicizing local kidnapping tragedies to score cheap points against their rivals. Ultimately, defeating these heavily armed factions requires a deeply unified citizenry. The Unite Against Terror movement is a call to action for everyday people. It's about demanding absolute financial accountability from leaders and refusing to let insecurity be weaponized for political gain. It's about insisting loud and clear that the wealth of the nation is actually used to protect the nation. I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Think about the broken refineries. Think about the unreliable power grid and the severely under-equipped local security forces. If that $120.5 billion in uncollected wealth was actually recovered and properly invested back into the country, how differently would your community look today? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and keep asking the tough questions.